Good morning, everybody. I'm Gabe Morales. I'm the Executive Director of Criminal Justice Solutions, and we have a good discussion today on officer safety. We have expert panelists here. They're all great. Each one of them could do 8 hours easy on this subject, but we're going to try to give you some of the key things that are happening today. The game has changed. For today's officers, for some of you maybe getting into the criminal justice system or starting at the academy, you know that things are a little bit different than they were back in the day. So let me first introduce Kurt Barber. He has served with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office in Illinois since 2003. He has previous experience with the Baltimore County Police Department and U.S. Army. He has worked in corrections, patrol, gangs, and the drug and gang unit as a detective, and has also done undercover work. He's been commander for the DuPage County Metro SWAT and a CNT instructor for the Midwest Counter Drug Training Center, as well as the Northeast Counter Drug Training Center. He's a member of the National Tactical Officers Association, Illinois Tactical Officers Association, International Undercover Officers Association, and many more. He is also the owner of K-Bar Consulting, LLC. Good morning, Kurt.
Morning.
And we have Dave Blake. David Blake, PhD, is a retired California peace officer and a court certified expert on police use of force and human factors psychology. His law enforcement experience included SWAT, gang unit, field training unit, force options unit, public information officer, and patrol. Dave earned his PhD after completing an extensive research project that ultimately identified influential factors contributing to officer-involved shootings. He has authored over 30 professional and peer-reviewed journal articles on police use of force and the application of human factors psychology to policing. Dave is also the lead consultant to Blake Consulting and Training. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you.
And next we have I'll do him last. Frank Savaglio, who is a sergeant and 15-year Cicero PD veteran. Cicero is located just outside of Chicago. Many of you may know that was Al Capone's headquarters for a while when they ran him out of Chicago. Frank was working in a very urban area outside of Chicago. He spent roughly 2 years in patrol and 12 years with the gang and narcotics unit, which they have a lot of gang problems overflow from the city of Chicago. As many of you know, a lot of the Chicago gangs have moved out further and further. So Cicero has been dealing with those problems for many years and still does. His duties include overseeing day-to-day operations, lead detective of 8 detectives, developing strategies on case management, and ensuring the proper flow of information throughout the department. He particularly enjoys developing the officers he manages by exposing them to a variety of cases and situations. Training is very important to Frank. He wants his people to be properly trained and prepared for what they may encounter on any given day. And believe me, in Cicero and Chicago, everything happens. Frank does his best to bring people together. He believes in networking in sessions like this one to bring you up-to-date and relevant training. This is very important, he believes, while working investigations in police work. Good morning, sir. Frank.
Morning, how are you?
Okay. All right. Make sure mic is working. And now we have Mr. Joe Salazar. Joe Salazar is currently a sergeant, correct, Joe? Still a sergeant? Sergeant with San Francisco Police Department. All of these guys, most of these guys have taught for me, and Joe has also done that many times, done an excellent job, and I know he'll do an excellent job here today. Joe's worked all kinds of positions as a cop, including gang officer and narcotics officer. He is also a former U.S. Marine like myself, and the owner, I had to do that. Oh, Carl, there you go. We have a few Marines here today. And the owner of Bullet 50 Gear. Good morning, Joe.
Hey, good morning.
Sorry for the little late check-in.
That's all right, brother. You're here. We just make you do 50 push-ups or something afterwards. Carl Cruz is a 26-year veteran of law enforcement, having spent the last 20 years with the Concord Police Department. Currently, he is the supervising sergeant of CPD, Narcotics Gang Unit. He has taught numerous classes on gangs and the gang culture, and he is very concerned about officer safety. And I will now hand it over to Carl to moderate the rest of the session. We will be standing by and break in at the end of this session. Gentlemen, thank you for all being here, and we'll get ready to learn, people.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good morning, guys. Thank you for being here. Let's just jump right into it. We've been in law enforcement for quite a while now, and we opened an academy. And we'll start with David, Mr. Blake. Do you see any of the topics that we were taught in the academy back in the day as still being taught today? Or is there a change or shift on what is being taught in reference to officer safety?
That's a good question. I'm a little surprised to go first. I wasn't ready.
I'm sorry. Well,
I'm going to speak specifically to California, and I know this stuff applies in other places throughout the country. We're seeing a dynamic shift over the last couple of years. A lot of people kind of point to Ferguson in 2014, and then 2015, the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing released their report, made all their recommendations. And that was kind of the pivot point, I think. But only recently has things really come to a head, especially in California with the shooting death of Oscar Grant in Sacramento in, I think it was 2019. That was the antecedent to a lot of major changes in law in California, which we didn't see for the longest time, or haven't seen prior to that. And then, of course, now we're seeing it all across the country. But it's, as they say, what starts in California sometimes seems to shift across the country. But it directly in reference to what you were asking about academy training, what we're seeing is the legislature is now pushing down a lot of stuff on CalPost. They obviously changed the use of force standard in the state of California a little bit. People definitely disagree on how much. You still have an underlying reasonableness standard, but they've added some aspects of de-escalation. They make it very clear that the sanctity of life is one of the most important aspects to consider in the grand scheme of use of force. And they want officers to use time, distance, and shielding and communication to alleviate the need to use force when feasible. So with that law change, we're now seeing that push down into the academy. So a lot of the, CalPost has a learning domain, a workbook for academy students, LD20 use of force. So that has undergone several revisions over the last couple of years, but right now we're at a point where that book has changed substantially in that it still has the underlying Graham standard, and it still reverts back to some of that information, but it also contains an incredible amount of information about communications, time, distance, and shielding, and de-escalation. So that's all novel information to a certain degree that's been included in the workbook. In addition to that, there is upcoming and other legal changes from the legislature in California in regards to the duty to intervene, which a lot of people will argue that we've been doing that for ages. That's not a new thing per se, but holding people criminally or policy-wise accountable to the duty to intervene. That's something new, which I think is going to pose a lot of challenges to law enforcement that we can talk about maybe at some point through this. And then, the changes are ongoing, but I think those are the big ticket items.
Okay, and I agree with you. The changes from the legislature and the use of force are incredible. Frank, are you seeing this in Chicago also?
So the biggest, I think that the fundamentals have changed or have remained the same in that, the type of training they're giving, but that could also be the generation of the instructor themselves, right? As new ones come in, they'll come in with the new ideas or reinforced with any new policies. However, CIT, crisis intervention training, has become huge at the ground level now. So us, or somebody like me who was a veteran had to go take a class, right? But now these kids are getting it right out of the gate. De-escalation is the hottest word in law enforcement right now, and they're hearing it quite often from what I'm understanding. My department's in a position where between now and next year, we have 37 academy spots open. So, or reserve, excuse me. So that's just going to tell you right now the big changeover we're getting. So we're going to go from middle of the road age department to extremely young very quick, because we just have a lot of people that happen to be retiring at the same time, and it could be because of the climate these days, but who knows? So that's what I've known as far as in what they're pushing in our academies out here now.
Yeah, it's a lot of departments are going through that right now because of the hiring, a lot of early retirements. Departments going to go from a very well-aged department balanced to a lot of young cops teaching young cops how to be cops. Joe,
Right.
What about you in San Francisco? Have you seen a change in the way the academies get officers ready for the streets?
Yeah, absolutely. That was discussed already by Frank and Dave. The San Francisco PD, who, we have our own regional academy. We've been doing this now for probably the last 4 years or so or more, talking about de-escalation and then mental health, because, for a long time, like the rest of the country right now, they're seeing a lot of homeless and a lot of, or at least in California, other parts of the greater Bay Area in California experience a lot of homeless. And with that, that comes with the mental health issue. Well, we've dealt with homeless, or at least I have in my career, the last 26 years now going on. So some of the policies that we're seeing now going across the country, anything the San Francisco PD has been implementing, and some of this was because of the dumbing down of drug laws and things of that nature. And yes, our department is way younger now. I see, at least in the San Francisco PD, if you go to our academy, you don't see very many old dogs in the academy as instructors or anything, though there's a few. We are indeed trying to implement everything that was kind of discussed and we can ongoing on a daily basis with the de-escalations and the things of that nature. So it is a big turning point. Absolutely. We see a tremendous amount of use of force, but in the de-escalation tactics has cut it down tremendously. However, it's still dangerous out there for police officers. I think a lot of these policies are made by people in the community, or you have politicians that are involved in these policies. Some of them are good, some of them are not realistic. And what we're seeing now, officers are getting in trouble more for violation of policies, not necessarily doing anything against the law. So you see a lot of issues with that in the San Francisco Police Department, which has led to a tremendous amount of retirements and the lack of actually hires. We can't get enough officers to come in and to fill the seats.
Yeah,
We normally have academies.
people sometimes don't understand that when we lose an officer that spent 25 years on the streets and we get an academy graduate, that's not a body for a body. We're losing 25 years of experience of situations that he's been to that are not going to get passed on to the younger officers that can use that.
Sure.
Kurt, quick question. I think we beat this one down already. The tools that we have now as a police officer are way different than the tools that we had when we first started this job. For example, when I went to the academy 26 years ago, I had a 6-shot pistol. Now everybody has a semi-auto. So what do you think some of these tools are, and are they good or bad for officer safety?
Well, I myself went to the academy well over 20 years ago. And part of the regular curriculum, there was a lot of tactics, a lot of hand-to-hand self-defense, a little bit in verbalization. I think at the time they called it verbal judo.
Yes.
Yes. And since it's kind of changed a little bit, I know that for us, we had to go through boxing and that type of PT. And as well as defensive tactics and, some of the shooting, a lot of shooting and a lot of driving and that sort of thing. I think now they're kind of throwing some more tools into the toolbox, like you were saying. I know my academy, it was in Maryland over 20 years ago, and at that time there in Maryland, such things such as tasers were not legal to use.
Mhm.
And actually, I don't even think they had tasers, but they called it stun guns. So there in Maryland, as a police officer or correctional officer, you couldn't even possess a stun gun. Since that, it has changed, and there's been many variations in terms of how to implement a taser. I know originally it came out across as being taught as a non-lethal, but it was not a weapon. It was not considered a weapon. Whereas nowadays, a lot of states are looking at it and considering it as a weapon. Um, my opinion is that the more tools that you put in the tool belt there, the more opportunity you have to utilize different things. And I think the reliance upon some of these other tools has become such that we're losing some of our basic reliance, such as hand to hand.
Thank you.
So when you start using a taser and you have that in your tool belt, what happens when that taser fails? Or what happens when another means fails? What do you have to rely upon?
Yeah, and that is true. I went to the academy. We didn't have tasers. We didn't have a lot of stuff that we have now. And our big thing was verbal judo. Talk to them, and then you had other tools. But that's one of the most important things I think an officer can do nowadays is be able to talk, de-escalate verbally. But then when the time comes to take action, don't hesitate. So, Mr. Blake, I was going to ask you complacency. Complacency hits a lot of officers because, for example, they'll go a week and not make one car stop, and then the car stop that they do make becomes a deadly situation. How do we battle complacency in today's age?
Question. Couple of ideas. One of the things I did when I was working, and I've worked gangs for a little bit. I had a picture inside my locker that a prisoner had drawn, and the person was clearly a gang member. And he had drawn a whole bunch of gang members stabbing, shooting, beating police officers. And prisoners are pretty good artists in some cases, and it was pretty graphic. And that was a reminder to me at the time that you need to stay engaged with your head on a swivel. And I always state that without being. You don't want to be hyper vigilant or overly on your guard, because it may make you jump to conclusions that you don't necessarily or aren't necessarily true. But certainly you have to find ways. When we're out there for 10, 12 hours on a shift, it's pretty much very, very difficult for any human being to just stay vigilant and aware and 360 head on a swivel for that amount of time. So there's obviously, it may be a good idea for periods of time, if possible, if calls allow for it, to take yourself offline or to have a supervisor kind of control that to a certain degree, if possible. If you're tired and you're tired because you're not getting enough sleep, fatigue's a big issue in law enforcement. Maybe that's a day to take a day off. But I think, it goes to also, just constantly being aware without becoming hyper vigilant that this is a dangerous job, and you do have to pay attention to what you're doing. You do have to maintain the ways that we're supposed to do things, instead of deciding I'm not going to use contact cover in this particular case. And we all get into that, right?
Right.
But those are the things. It's those little slips that develop over time that all of a sudden it's become a habit. Your complacency has become a habit, and you're doing things like that all the time, going to calls by yourself, not using contact cover, and you don't even realize it. And that's one of the things where I say, here's an issue that supervisors should recognize and step in, because supervisors need to recognize that behavior, correct it, to make sure that person doesn't slip into complacency.
Yes, I see that all the time. And as supervisors, it's our duty to bring it up to them, address that issue. So Frank, what advice would you give a young officer going through the streets nowadays about staying connected, staying active when he's out there?
Well, depending on activity, and what I've noticed in our town is it's really sporadic. It's a beautiful Saturday evening, and you just know somebody's going to get shot or something's going to happen, and then nothing, and then we have a homicide on a Tuesday morning. So you really can't plan for it. But like David was saying, you just got to stay engaged, right? Not make that car a coffin, and I don't just mean like when a shootout's happening. Get up, get out. Even with just taking a quick break, stretching your legs. So in the event that you have to, spring into action, you're not going to pull something because you're going from 0 to 100 in a second. With fatigue and stuff like that, a buddy like me as a supervisor, if I know there's been a guy who's been on a trial, all week or something like that, I'm going to be more inclined to partner them up with somebody. So, they're not by themselves. Depending on manpower with us, we'll ride with a partner or we won't. Again, engaging these guys like in some kind of little scenario or doing like a little training with them on the street. I'll go pull us into our parking structure, maybe run a quick scenario, take them down to the range, do something to break up the monotony. I noticed this heavily, particularly when COVID first hit in March of 20, right? For us, the entire department went to uniform, even us in the gangs, the detectives. So we had 12-hour shifts, and you want to talk about complacency, right? So we had to come up with a lot of creative ways to combat that. And the biggest one is, responding to calls, going to the same domestic 100 times, and Mary and Joe are fighting, and it's the same thing. And then the 101 time, now Joe's got a pistol, and people tend to come right up to a door, when they should be, better on their approach, or going to an alarm call at the same dollar store 5 times a week, and, pulling the car right up to the door. So just like, as David said, or you guys are saying as a supervisor, I know it's, my responsibility to correct those behaviors. And that's just stuff that should never change, because you can go to a call 100 times, and then it's that one time that you go and you're not prepared, something happens.
You're right. It's I fell victim to that a couple of times, working graveyards, going to the same alarm call, Costco's rear door left ajar, and we get complacent, and the 50th time, it's actually a break-in and the guys have guns, and I'm at a disadvantage because now I have to react to their actions.
Right.
Joe, I'm going to jump in another subject.
Sure.
Social media. Everyone has got a camera. Everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone is always recording the police doing simple stuff. Do you see social media as causing younger officers a problem because now they know they're being recorded and they're going to act differently than the way they were taught?
Yeah, I don't know. The biggest problem I see with social media, I see more and more cops just on their phones.
Oh God.
Nothing, you know what I mean? I mean, the cameras, they come out all the time. We preach all the time to our officers, and the officers know that somebody's filming. There's city cameras that are up. There's cameras. We just got the
body worn cameras.
The taser. Yeah, the taser body worn cameras. All the muni buses in San Francisco got cameras. We're pretty knowledgeable that things are being filmed. I do think that younger officers are well aware of that, and they're involved in the technology. The only thing I could say is the reverse, that maybe the officers' own cell phones are distractions to them because there's so many social media platforms and things of that nature. So I've constantly have, remind officers to stay off their phone, or being like Frank when I'm with my undercover teams and my gang guys, we're pretty spot on a lot of times. But, if you're just driving around in uniform and patrol, you can find somebody parked who thinks they're safe, and then they're on their social media program. But for the most part, and I like I say, in the greater Bay Area, San Francisco, we're all pretty well aware of the cameras and people are filming.
Oh yeah, I mean, I tell my guys all the time, we're getting filmed. We're always filmed. So Kurt, I was gonna ask you the same thing. So use of force is never pretty. And I've testified on numerous times that the officer's actions were correct, but to a non-trained person, they look excessive. What conversations would you have with younger officers telling them, hey, you have to do this, it'll look bad, but you still have to do this? Um, how do we have conversations with the public to tell them what we're doing?
Well, and that's a great question. There's actually two parts to that question there. And the first part is the perception versus reality.
Correct.
And reality is not always perception. However, to the general public, perception is reality. And a lot of times what we'll see on the social medias or even mainstream media is a segment of what happened. And it does look bad. And officers are aware of this. And I know with current status on things in terms of the media relations regarding police, Ferguson effect kind of takes place here, and officers do become complacent, or they decide not to engage in things because they want to remain in a positive manner so that they don't risk their career or even a criminal filing on them. But one of the things that we have to encourage as older officers, more experienced officers, and trainers here is for younger officers to continue with training and train constantly. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that officer safety as well as the public safety is paramount to our mission. And yes, some of this stuff is going to look bad for the officer if you show just a segment here. What I would say for the officer, though, is being able to articulate what you did and how you did, and using the amount of force reasonable in order to effect the arrest or to prevent harm from the citizen or to yourself, is something that you need to be aware of, constantly aware of, and no more force than that which is reasonable. And I know even going through the academy many years ago, that was something that was discussed there because of the officer's adrenaline of a situation, how far officers can end up taking things just based on the adrenaline there.
Yes.
But that's something that training and control tactics of the officer themselves can be utilized. For the public there, a lot of this, their perception. Now, I've dealt with public day in, day out. And I would say that the majority of the police or majority of the public actually do support law enforcement and their efforts there.
I agree.
The mainstream media and even social media, they're giving a platform to a minority of people that feel that there's all police are bad. And the general public, I believe, support our efforts there. I would say that for us, for the public, just to be able to interact with them socially, even if we're not on a call, just to interact with the public, we'll show them that we're people too. And when use of force things come up, perhaps then the benefit of the doubt will enter their minds, and they'll give us a chance to be able to explain our actions. Because as we all know, when it's shown on the news, only that small segment, which is damning for the police officers, ever shown.
Thank you, Kurt. And I believe we're going to be taking a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come right back to this panel discussion.
If you're ready to visit that lush, tropical place you've always wanted to, now is the time. But finding the best bang for the buck can be hard. Where should you go? What kind of warm weather destination is right for you and will fit your budget? You need a professional to help. And now you have a friend in the travel business. Your Evolution agent has the backing of a 60-year-old travel company behind them. They can find you the best time of year to travel and the best hotels, beaches, or all-inclusive resorts at a price that suits your needs. They can also book your airfare, car rental, or side trips in one convenient transaction. But why use a travel pro? Industry studies show that most self-bookers overspend an average of $452 per person when not using a skilled agent. So don't resort to scouring the internet for hours only to find that amazing price already expired. Call your Evolution agent and let them do the work for you.
And I guess we're back now. Okay, so this is gonna go now for David. Training. once we get out of the academy, we go through all that rigorous training and we want to pass, we get a job, we want to get a job. So we are really focused on getting to the academy. But once we go to the academy, we, like my department, we have 4 training days a year, 2 shooting, 2 weaponless defense. What would you tell younger officers to do in order to stay sharp, like to win the academy, but 10, 15 years down the road?
Wow, another hard question.
I'm sorry.
I'm still in that commercial in Hawaii.
I know.
Yeah, what's going on here?
So let me start by saying that you brought up a good point. You spend 900 to 1,000 hours or more here in California just in the academy learning skills. You spend 80 hours in firearms, you spend 40 hours in use of force, and then some, just as many hours in learning defensive tactics to establish what they talk about as being proficiency. And then we go to our departments and we have 8 hours once a year, if we're lucky in some.
Yes.
So there's something, I'm going to get into my psychology a little bit, but there's something called learning decay. And so the question is, or actually the problem is we don't know in law enforcement, there hasn't been sufficient enough study or interest in learning, are we teaching things effectively? And are we teaching things in a way that will establish proficiency and then keep it over a time? So how do we know what's effective? How do we know what's the right way? And there's some emerging research that's coming out saying that some of the methods that we use are not adequate. But with all that said, to answer I'm going to say something that's probably going to be a little unpopular depending on how hard people are on this subject. There's an expectation, I think, in law enforcement for officers to go out and do their own training and do their own practical skill sets, go join a gym, go take jiu-jitsu classes, go to the range on their own. And that's fine. And I think that a certain amount of that should be required of a professional. But at the same time, I also believe that we really need to do a better job at looking at how those proficiency issues, and agencies need to up the amount of training to establish that proficiency and test that issue. Can you walk down the hall in your PD and randomly grab 10 officers, kind of put them under a little stress and tell them, hey, put me in a twist lock right now, or whatever defensive tactics you want to name? Can they do it? Can they do it effectively without hemming and hawing around? And if not, if you've got 5 out of 10 officers who can do it, you've got a 50% proficiency rate. You're, as a trainer or as an executive staff member, I'm going to take a step back. So again, there is some individual responsibility, I think, for officers to go out and train, but I also think agencies need to make sure that their people are proficient and ensure they get the quality training that they need and deserve while they're on the clock.
Wow, you bring up so many points that I want to talk some more about. You're right. I think the officers are responsible for their own fitness, and 8 hours a year on how to do a twist lock is not enough. These are called perishable skills for a reason. And if you don't practice, these skills are going to become second nature. What are you going to do when you're under stress? When someone's actually fighting back? When you're thinking, oh man, I'm behind the curve here. That's a good point. Frank, you have a PowerPoint you want to show us. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So obviously we're talking about officer safety, and officer safety is generally reserved for, well, I'll just get right into it actually. Hold on. Officer safety is traditionally focused on how police officers operate in the field. In this presentation, we will look at whole officer safety. A police officer's all-around well-being is just as important as safely operating in the field. Today, we will talk about some of the ways we can stay safe throughout several aspects of our lives. So Sorry, I did the wrong graphic there and it faded into nothing. My bad, but I can still read it. So operational safety, we've talked about not becoming complacent, right? So again, staving off, with boredom on a long shift, keeping yourself engaged, responding to the same type of call over and over and again, but treating it, just as serious every single time. Communicating with fellow officers, whether that's on the approach to a call, on the way to a call if you can, or if you're about to go hands-on with somebody, let's make sure that we're working together, not, okay, let's take this guy down and I'm pulling him to the right, my officer's pulling him to the left, and it ends up being something that it doesn't need to turn into. Staying current on the law. We all know these things change almost, it seems like, on a daily basis. So there's a lot of resources out there. Case law, there's Leo training done by Dale Anderson. I don't know if any of you guys know about that. That's a super, a good resource to use. Just stay current on the law, and when you know what you know, you can do what you do, right? So train like you fight. If you're going to go into a training class and go half speed and everything and not take it serious, then that might be what happens when you're out on the field. So take training seriously and train like you fight. So family safety, right? Don't bring work home with you. We signed up for this, they didn't. So try to do your best to just keep what's at work. Keep family first. I know that in my career, my schedule hasn't been very ideal for a family man. Luckily, I have the support of my wife and my kids, but in the beginning, you couldn't get me to stop not want to go to work. So, I found myself kind of putting it first, right? It was, exciting new unit and stuff like that. And we were pretty busy doing some good work. So, but I had to stop and realize what I was doing it all for, right? So keep family first and be sure that your spouse or partner are aware of benefits. What I mean is, in the event of, God forbid, a disability, permanent disability or death, so they know what's out there, so they're not just left in the dark or, what are we going to do now? And retire in a reasonable age and enjoy life. You know what? When you're ready to go, don't stay a year or two for another 2% bump. Just go, right? So you can enjoy that retirement. Next, we'll talk about financial safety. And that's living within your means, right? If, we make good money, but, we have other responsibilities and I notice a lot of kids get off probation and go buy some kind of, $70,000 SUV or car. I mean, just live within your means. That's all. So you don't have to work 10 side jobs and you're constantly tired, Consult with a financial planner, outside of a pension system, you have 401ks, all kinds of other deferred compensation. Use resources available to first responders. There's a lot of nice credit unions and stuff that first responders have exclusive access to. They got a lot of good rates on vehicle or mortgage loans. And lastly is retiring financially sound. Whatever your financial goal is, make sure you can achieve it within 5 years of retirement, so that when you're leaving, depending on the age you retire, a lot of us want to do, work, but not that you have to, because you just want to. Individual safety. So this is just something that kind of comes with the job. I've noticed, don't let the job define you. I don't know if you guys have ever been at a party and you get introduced. It's, oh, this is Frank, he's a cop, right? But he didn't say, hey, this is Mike, he's a plumber, right? They just said, this is Mike. So it kind of inherently will do that, right? Maintain your beliefs, even if they're not popular. If you're a liberal or conservative or whatever it is, both on or off the clock. I've noticed, particularly within the last year or so, neighbors and friends are starting to engage me in conversations that, could turn adversarial, right? So, I don't know if I'm just their inlet into the cop world. They want to know my opinion, right, before they give me theirs. So, whatever you think is right, on or off duty, just stick with it. Remember all those in your life before you got on the job. There's friends, family from before. Sometimes we lose touch or whatever. And you know, I had a buddy from high school told me, he literally said, "Oh, I didn't know. I thought you only hung out with cops now." And you know, I just we were who we were before we got on the job, and we're still that person. You know, just now we wear the uniform, right? So, and lastly, don't follow the crowd. You know, if you have a belief or there's something that you like to do or don't like to do, and you know, you're just trying to fit in the department as, you know, a new recruit or a new officer or whatever, if it doesn't suit you, just don't do it, right? I mean, generally work, you maintain a professional relationship. There are certain people that you'll be friendly with, but other than that, your biggest concern should be, you know, somebody's how like staying safe on the street. Other than that, just do your own thing. Next is community safety. Get to know members of your community. Like Kurt was saying earlier, right? Engaging. I like to drive by. If I see a kid or somebody walking down the street and they look in my direction, I like to wave, right? So then, oh, look, you know, engaging in the community, I think will pay dividends later down the road. And developing a relationship with your local youth. This is super important. We should try to get to them before the local gangbangers get to them and tell them the police are bad, don't trust the police, and have them start, you know, holding their contraband because they understand how lenient the juvenile justice system is. And next, ensuring citizens are aware of available resources, just educating people in the community. You know, if you get flagged down for something, they have a question about parking permits or you know, community resources, direct them to a website or whatever it could be that that they could use for help. And with that being becoming a force multiplier, I know you guys know that's a military term, right? But engage in the community, and especially for us, like in a gang unit or narcotics, how nice would it be if we have a relationship with some people on the block, you know, flagging out, hey, you know what, you know that car you guys have been looking for, or I've noticed this kind of activity outside of this house. They could be your eyes and ears. Next is emotional safety. So keeping your emotions in check and field, we all know why, right? Nowadays, people are going to shove a camera phone in your face and just try to get you to fly off the handle, and then there you go, right? But you know, it's just not worth it. No matter what, how gratifying it might feel in the moment, it's not going to be worth it later. Learn the warning signs of emotional trouble. You know, how are you feeling? How am I feeling before, you know, I blow up on my wife or, you know, on a coworker or on a call, right? Start to recognize those warning signs in yourself and recognizing among fellow officers, right? So you could maybe prevent somebody else from you know, making a terrible decision. And just knowing that it's not okay to be okay. We have all kinds of peer support systems in place now, and you know, there's counseling for specifically for law enforcement, but it's not going to help if you don't reach out. So I know there's been a stigma within law enforcement for years about that. I don't know if people thought it was a sign of weakness, but unfortunately we knew what the end result usually was. We lost a lot of officers, you know. So next is reputation safety. So just treat others how you want to be treated. You know, I was always wanted to be tough but fair, right? Be mindful of conduct both on and off duty, particularly like now in Illinois, July 1st, people are going to be able to make anonymous complaints. So, you know, I don't know, just like I said, just we're held to that higher standard now more than ever. Everything is better in moderation. So, you know, we all like to have our drinks every now and again and unwind. Just, you know, if you're going to do it in a bar or whatever, I mean, take an Uber, just don't overdo it. Because also it can have impacts on your health, right, later on. And, you know, sometimes we just don't make the greatest decisions while we're drinking. So, and lastly is careful what you post on social media. Again, you know, we're supposed to be able to have an opinion, but it seems like that's being taken away from us slowly. And it's whatever, right? An opinion is an opinion, but sometimes people go a little bit too overboard. And again, it's that higher standard. And you're a reflection of yourself, your family, your police department, and you don't want to bring any undue attention. So that is my presentation on officer safety.
Wow. Awesome, awesome, awesome. You brought up so many good points that I wish I had another hour just to go into all of those things, because you're right. You know, my social media page, I think, is mine, personal.
Yeah, yeah,
But defense attorneys will go into it before we go to trial, and they'll nitpick posts that I made 20 years ago when I was in the Marine Corps,
absolutely.
and they'll use that against me, and it doesn't become the trial of a guilty person, it becomes a trial of to my reputation.
Right.
Great point. Joe, let me
Yes.
ask you about communication. I was a former training officer, and having those uncomfortable conversations with my partners when they do something wrong, when they stand in front of a doorway, when they park right in front of the house where they're going to. How would you approach a younger officer who is seeing this behavior from a tenured officer? And so how do you get them to, don't do that, do it the right way? Or what kind of conversation would you have with a younger officer?
Yeah, anytime if I observe an officer safety issue, I'll address it after, the scene is safe or back at the station or anything. We discussed a little bit about how much training is necessary for a police officer. Is it our responsibility, or does the academy, going to the academy for officer advanced training is only, required in San Francisco twice a year, ranges twice a year. I tell every officer, be it my undercover teams or people on patrol that I supervise, the officers on patrol, every contact, every single car stop, every single call to service that we go to is indeed a training opportunity. And you got to take the time to debrief and speak with your officers and how we could have done better. I even asked my officers, hey, we had a search warrant not too long ago. What could I have done better to communicate with you? Or what do you think could have this plan been better? Even though we thoroughly plan out our ops, there's something that you can discuss after. So in the scenario you gave me about seeing an officer doing something unsafe, yes, immediately after, or even maybe if it's really egregious, I'm going to have to, push him out of the doorway or something. That way he's safe if the scene is unsafe. However, that would be something that you would have to discuss. And then I encourage, be it my squad or be it a group of officers that we're on a call to scene, that we critique each other after the fact and how we operated. So I always say never let a call to service and opportunity pass to discuss things with your partner and how you could have done it better. Even if in the times I've worked as a SAM officer, a solo officer on a car stop, I asked myself, debrief myself, was my approach safe?
Yes.
Things of that nature. And that way you don't get complacent. So the training opportunities are there on a daily basis. We do just have to have that conversation amongst ourselves. And it's not a Monday morning cornerback. It's not a bitch session. We want to have a reasonable amount of positive answers and a conclusion that makes sense. That's where I go with that.
That was my favorite game on Graveyards. When I used to catch myself getting complacent, I would tell myself, let's play the game tonight. Could they have gotten me? Could they have hurt me? Could they have shot me on that call, on that car stop? And you have to be honest with yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I walked up with my flashlight and my gun hand, and I walked up and I never touched the trunk of the car. Yeah, and that's how I stayed awake. So we're gonna start wrapping this up real quick, but I want to go to Kurt. And Kurt, what are some of the warning signs that newer officers should be looking for when they're dealing with potential bad guys? Something that might give them the edge to know, hey, something bad might be coming my way. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked me that question. One of the things I go around the country instructing is identifying deceptive behaviors,
Yes.
which is primarily body language and tone and voice. So as it relates to officer safety, there is a lot of things that a person will do to indicate that there's an attack or you're in an unsafe position. One of the first things that I do want to talk about here briefly is the reptilian brain. And what that is I'm sure David could probably tell you here, the reptilian brain here is what regulates our breathing and that gut feeling. As a cop, you get a bad feeling, your hair starts standing up on that traffic stop. Maybe you need to call for backup. So it begins there. And then when you're talking to a person, your proxemics, the closer you get to that person, are they getting jumpy? Are they looking around for something? Are they giving you 1,000-yard stare? What's their hands doing? Are they clenching, into fists? Where are their hands? How are they standing? I mean, a lot of these things are indicators as to what a person has in their mind. And the problem is that 80% of communication is nonverbal. So if we're only concentrating on what a person is saying and not what they're doing or how they're projecting or are their actions congruent with what they're saying, we're missing a big part of that picture. And if we can look at everything surrounding this and not have that tunnel vision in terms of what they're saying, if we can take a look at their body language, their posture, how they're answering, their tone, is it slow, is it deliberate, is it fast? If we put all these things together, it's going to give us a bigger picture of what that person's intent is toward us.
Yes, as a training officer, I would tell some people, you were flat-footed. You didn't blade yourself. You didn't put your gun sight away from them. Oh, did you see the guy, his chest heaving up and down? Something's going to happen, and you were sitting there going, oh my God. I know. So I think we're just about done. I'll go around again the panel, closing thoughts on your best advice for these up-and-coming new officers. Mr. Blake?
Very briefly, I think that one thing that we have to be doing, and this is not only just for the new officer, but it's for everybody in law enforcement to include executives and chiefs and even people above that rank. We got to start looking at law enforcement holistically. So we've been talking about officer safety kind of as an individual responsibility. We need to look at it from more organizational standpoint. So executives ought to be looking at the organization saying, do I have the appropriate staffing to ensure my officers are safe on the street? Do they have cover? Have I provided them equipment and training and in the appropriate oversight and policy to make sure that they're safe and acting appropriate on the street? Supervisors, we've breached that topic a bit. They need to correct behavior when they see it to ensure that officer safety standards are maintained. Supervisors, we need to make sure supervisors are on the street rather than in the office, and that's an issue. But it's been talked about pretty prolifically that supervisors can control scenes, de-escalate scenes, pull their officers back who are getting a little the blinders on as they're starting to go into a situation, and they need to plan operations effectively. And then, of course, we know that the officers need to do their officer safety work if we've been talking about certain skill sets, but I also always address the fact that they need to have an academic background. You need to know the law. Right now in California, we did a poll not long ago, or I didn't, but another training company did. And they found that I think almost 50% of several hundred officers didn't even realize the legal standards had changed. So we need to know and be able to articulate very well, especially now more than ever, the legal standards for use of force, and be able to articulate why we did what we did and how we did it. Because at the end of the day, these are the things that are going to cause you to lose your job, get sued, or potentially spend a significant amount of time in jail. And we're seeing increased prosecutions in California based on these new standards. So we better, we need to take this very seriously.
I work in California, and the defense of I didn't know that is not going to get you very far with the judge or the DA's office. Frank, any closing remarks?
So for new officers, obviously, take training seriously, come onto this job with an open mind, know your limitations, leave your egos at home, right? And just know that you need to stay current on training, on the law. You're going to be getting into one of the, if not the hardest job on the planet right now. And let's take a look at what happened in Minneapolis. When you see something breaking bad, turning around and trying to keep the crowd back isn't going to cut it. You have to, if there's not somebody else there, you might be the one that has to step in and take action, right? your buddy might be mad at you for a week, but you know, half the country won't burn. So they're difficult decisions, right? And they could happen on your first day or in your 10th year. So
Sure.
just be ready for them and take the appropriate action.
Joe, you work in a very diverse city. I love San Francisco, very diverse. Any advice for our officers right now?
Yes, I recommend know the rules, know your policies, know the laws first, know how to operate under those laws and those policies of your department first and foremost. And it is an almost astronomical task, though, to stay up to date with current policies and things of that nature. It's almost impossible. It's like you almost have to get offline for a month to really catch up and understand. I think from a liability point, a lot of departments just push it out to their officers via email or a quick lineup training, and it's really not enough to understand. Number two, man, keep yourself mentally fit as well as physically fit. Find a good mentor too. A lot of things we talked about today, a lot of the de-escalation tactics and everything. Good veteran police officers have been doing this as long as before I was a cop. I had good mentors when I was younger in the SFPD. It's 26 years later down the road. I'm trying to be a good mentor. Try to establish good relationships with any good officer that wants to learn the job. And I would just say, just take an interest in your career and move forward in a positive direction.
Yes.
I still love this job. It's a great job. Though it's San Francisco and it's crazy in California, you can't convince me to leave right now. So,
I'm 56 years old. I'm 6 years past retirement, and I still love coming to work to be around people like you. And
sure.
True words. Kurt, finish us off. Give me something good.
Well, here it is. Everyone has said some very valid things here. And when it comes to officer safety, there are so many avenues that we can explore and we can talk about. I'm nearing toward the end of my career, thankfully. I got less than 2 years left, and then I do plan on enjoying my life there, Frank, as you so validly put. But if you're new to this career, or even if you got a few more years left, one of the things that I would say to people, and I've always believed this, is training is going to be the key to a good foundation and continuing. And there's a Chinese proverb that says, once we stop learning, we die. So when we learn every day, it helps us become better. And one of the reasons I love to do instructing is because it reinvigorates what I already know. It reinforces what I already know. And the fact is that I can learn something new from somebody else, whether they're a new person, whether they're a veteran. So being open-minded is very positive. The other thing is we have to take a look at our career, our profession in general here. I can say many years ago, I would say a lot of people, why did you get into this career? And maybe it was because they wanted to make arrests. They wanted action and excitement. But the reality of the matter is this. If you take a look at how many arrests you make a day, it may be one, it may be none, it may be a couple a day. But the amount of people that you talk to daily is so great. And our skills as police officer have to center around communication and people skills. Treat people as you would want to be treated yourself. If you do that, you're going to have a successful career.
You guys said some things that I wish I could go, yes, my first FTO back in 1991 told me, talk to everyone like you would want them to talk to your grandparents. Like, wow. And it still applies today. You guys have brought up so many great, valid points. And I just want to conclude by saying, check your egos. Check your egos, keep learning. Surround yourself with good people, positive people, mentors, and you get through this. This is a tough job, but if you do the right things the first time, you're going to be okay. And with that, Gabe, I think we reached our time limit.
All right, man, excellent, gentlemen, all of you. Wow, I couldn't have hoped for better, and I hope that people enjoyed this session, and we did record it, so people that missed it can watch that. This is definitely a very important subject, one of the most important that officers will have to deal with, and you guys covered the subject very good in 1 hour. And thank you very much. I will be in touch with you all. Aloha. Gabe Morales, Criminal
Go
Justice
in.
Solutions.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. You guys were awesome. You guys bailed me out. I was pulling questions out and you guys did an awesome job. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good job,
All right.
yourself. Good job.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Talk to you later.